over at the neighbor's house, voices are getting raised. Names are being called. Are they just arguing or fighting? Is someone going to get hurt? Well, these days, for Canadians, that's the sound coming from our next-door neighbors, from the U.S., where the tone of public discussion, especially in parts of the American media, has reached both a furious new pitch and an ugly new low.
The mainstream media, the old media, ABC, NBC, CBS, the major newspapers in each city, and of course the New York Times nationally, Time Magazine, Newsweek, they're part of the lunatic left, which is losing power and can't figure out how to get it back.
One of the things you're most often asked about
Yes.
is a comment you made shortly after September the 11th, 2001. And you said something to the effect that what we should do is invade their countries.
Kill their leaders, convert them to Christianity. Yes, there are now T-shirts memorializing that with my
just
face.
say it again. What is it?
I said we should invade their countries, kill their leaders, and convert them to Christianity. And the whole topic is getting a teensy bit boring for me.
Was that a joke as well?
No, it was not. In fact, I think Canada may have noticed this, but by Friday of the week of 9/11, point 1 and point 2 were official government policy.
Do you think the tone of that debate in the U.S. these days, in effect, gives people who follow it permission to look on those who may have different philosophical or political points of view as the enemy or treasonous?
Well, they are the enemy. They're rooting against America.
Now, these are people who simply may share a different political point of view at a certain point in time than you do. How can they possibly be the enemy of this country?
But the different point of view is rooting for their country or rooting against their country. They are the enemy. That's why we make fun of them.
Simply because they don't see things your way?
Apparently a lot of Americans...
And of greater economic opportunities for women throughout the world. But in reality, the work that this administration has done and some of the policies that it's pushing for has been detrimental to women's prosperity and empowerment in a whole host of ways. There's a wealth of academic research showing us that gains in women's education and employment can be attributed to increasing access to contraceptions. That access has given millions of women control over their future and better enable them to participate in workforce and contribute both to local and global economies. And so I'm wondering if you can tell us how the policy priority that we have and our mission makes sense in regards to the proposed cuts to family planning that your department is putting forth.
I have not been briefed on that particular matter at this point. I know the administration, the administrators has been pushing an initiative to push out the implementation and the programs of USAID down to the more local level and to the betterment of people in country. But I can't speak to your immediate question, but I can take that question for the record.
Wonderful. Ms. Leavitt, did you have a...
As my colleague has answered, we'll gladly follow up with many details for that, details that will demonstrate the breadth and extent of our basic education programs and higher education programs around the world and how in many cases they prioritize access to education to girls, to young women, how we advance entrepreneurial types of programs, economic livelihood types of programs in support of girls and women. So we have a wealth of programs that help advance.
No, that's well and dandy. My question was investment in family planning and the opportunities to have access to contraceptions and how we know that that there is so much research that backs that gives families the ability to have advancement when the girls and the women in the family have an ability to earn an education and enter the workforce.
And we look forward to following up with you with a detailed follow-up.
Wonderful. Ambassador, I wanted to follow up with Mr. Liu's questions earlier in diversity in hiring, promotion, and retention. You mentioned earlier that you wanted to take a broad definition of diversity, and I wanted to see who's included within that definition. Are we including people with disabilities? Okay. Is that a yes?
I'm sorry, Congresswoman. Yes, that is
Okay.
yes.
Does that include the LGBT community?
Yes, it does.
Does it include religious minorities?
Religious minorities are protected under the Civil Rights Code, so yes.
And are we currently collecting that data for these categories?
So the data collection is done on a volunteer basis, which has always been one of the struggles. People have to self-identify, and we do not, I believe, collect on all this. I will have to get back to you, Congresswoman, because I'm not sure about some.
Yeah. Do you think
categories.
it's helpful for us to collect this data? Does that inform us in some sort of way to make sure that we are able to diversify and promote and retain people?
I think sometimes it would. For example, I chair the committee that looks at assignments to principal officer positions and deputy chief of mission positions. And one of the things we look at is diversity. Are we making sure that we have the most diverse slate of candidates for every position? Now, 12 people sit on the committee. These are senior level jobs. We tend to know a lot of people. We're not that big. So sometimes we know somebody's diverse, but then it may show up on their profile because they've opted not to do that. So we've left it up to the individual. I think sometimes that could hurt the statistics, of course. And sometimes it's just someone at the table who says, listen, I know that this candidate is a diverse candidate. But we do not have something in place. I'm sort of on the fence. I don't want to necessarily push somebody, but yes, does it hurt people sometimes? And obviously we don't have a really accurate record.
No, I appreciate that, and I hope that we're able to look at it, because the reason I ask is that I anecdotally hear Muslims leaving this department because of this administration's perceived hostility towards the Muslim community or the LGBTQ community, leaving because of that perceived hostility. And so I